Live. We are here on live on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome to Gray Matter. Joining me, as always, via Brooklyn is Mr. Rob Lee Davis.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, buddy. I'm gonna actually do a quick share of our, and I'm doing like 6 things at once, everybody. So give me a break here. And there you go. You can see us both there. All right. So happy Friday, everybody, as we close the music out here on the little jam session that we like to do.
May is coming to an end slowly.
May is coming to an end. Oh, there we go. Now I'm muted.
New Year.
Right. New Year. So, how was your week, Rob? Before we get into the mix of everything, right?
It's been all right so far. We having great, like amazing weather here in New York. I love hot weather, right? So
right.
We had like some 88-degree days, 80-degree days. Like I need this all the time.
Do you? I get it, man. I'm going to put a quick comment in. Hey, so everybody who's listening right now, I'm putting in a link for YouTube. And the reason why, if you're on Facebook and you're watching us, is the last couple weeks, we have had issues with our live stream on Facebook. YouTube, smooth as butter. But Facebook, for some bizarre reason, has been spotty, and it cuts in and out, which is super frustrating. We want you guys to be able to stay around for the conversation. We want to be able to chat with you. So Rob's going to monitor our Facebook. I'm going to be monitoring our YouTube, and
Yes.
And we will be trying to keep in touch with everybody. But just so you all know, we are potentially going to be lost at some point, and so we want to make sure, on Facebook. So I got a nice, happy YouTube link right there at the bottom. That'll take you straight to this show on YouTube, but you can go from Facebook. So just check out the comment I just put there if you want to move over to YouTube for us, just to make sure we have an uninterrupted link. And so, anyway, back to it. So we're going to talk today about a few things, as always, Rob. Right? We're going to talk.
Yes.
We got some world issues, and we're gonna try to solve the Middle East peace problem because we're experts.
In 1 hour.
In 1 hour. We're not even going to do it in 1 hour. We're going to do it in about half an hour because we're going to start out with cannabis. As always, we really want to kind of, obviously we'll talk about some cannabis issues. And there's a weird one that happened in the past week. There's this House bill that was kind of secret and quiet here in Colorado, House Bill 1317, that's in committee and it's been passed. There was a nice long session a couple nights ago where people were speaking out against it. And it's a big source of frustration for me when these kind of bills come out. And so let me just explain what House Bill 1317 is really quickly, Rob. So basically, it's a means to limit how much concentrates you can purchase at a time. For medical patients, for kids, actually. So if you're a medical kid from ages 18 to 21, you can actually purchase cannabis in Colorado if you have a medical recommendation, meaning you have some kind of medical problems. They're saying, without any proof that I've seen, I haven't seen any. It's always fun when legislation's done without proof. Not that we've seen that anywhere on the federal side, right?
No, that's never happened before.
Never happened. That there's this huge amount of diversion. Well, diversion is kind of the term that you would use in this. Diversion meaning they buy it legally and then it gets diverted to black market. So they're saying right now the reason for this bill, one of the reasons for this bill, is that they're worried that the children are buying mass quantities of concentrates and selling them to their friends. So they're now saying these medical kids who have medical recommendations for concentrates are now also being criminals, and they're buying concentrates for their friends.
Yeah, they have no proof.
Not that I've seen. I was not in any of the committees. I did not, I was not really made aware that it was happening until it was already happening, right? And that's the other thing is this legislation was done kind of quietly behind closed doors. It wasn't really shared with the industry, which is always fun to regulate an industry that doesn't get to talk about, have to come to the table. Whereas most of the time, it's like they get to write their own regulations on the federal side. The oil companies get to write their regulations half the time, depending on who's in power. But but here we go. We have cannabis, which is still considered like plutonium in a lot of ways, is how dangerous it is. is being adjusted and regulated without the industry's feedback. So here's some of the things that they're saying. So basically, if you're a medical patient, you can buy 40 grams at a time. You can actually purchase it. That's a lot. Now, as a recreational purchaser, I can buy 8 grams of concentrates. 8 grams is a lot, by the way, just to be clear on the concentrate side. 40 grams is a hell of a lot. But if you're able to buy 40 grams, yeah, you do need it medically. So there could be some arguments on this side that, yeah, they could be able to buy 8 grams at a time, and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if you have a special recommendation as a patient, you could be able to get more. And so it is going to be a hard one for them to stop on that one, the limit of 8 grams, bringing from what it is down to 8 grams for medical, because it's already there for rec. And that's probably going to pass no matter what in the bill. Whether people like it or not. And there are arguments for why somebody who needs more grams. And so obviously a patient who has medical issues, who's, you know, you could say they're disabled in a wheelchair, or they have, like, you know, a serious seizure disorder. Yeah, you do need more than that. You might need a gram a day of concentrates, or, you know, or if you're taking Rick Simpson oil where you're ingesting it, you do need a lot. And so they're saying they'll make exceptions for that. So that's how they're getting around that. What's really stupid about this, this is the stupidest part of the rule, in my opinion. Well, there's a few. There's a few. One of them is that concentrates have to now be served or purchased in 1/10 of a gram servings. Okay. So let's just look at this. So, for example, you can buy a gram, you know, I'm not sure. I think it's usually in gram servings right now. That's how I've seen it. I mean, maybe somebody's doing 2 grams at a time, and I think you can buy larger amounts, but usually you're looking at gram servings, maximum. And so they're saying a portion is they're saying a dosage is 1/10 of a gram, which is inaccurate, first of all. Okay. Now, if you start telling people 1/10 of a gram is a dosage, they might think that whole 1/10 of a gram is the dosage, and they'll do it. And if they're new to concentrates, they're going to be on their ass, most likely. And it's too much. So this is why you don't have people who, like, you don't have people regulate something when they don't know what the hell they're talking about. You know, I mean, that's kind of imagine that, right?
Imagine rooms full of men making decisions about women's reproductive health. Imagine that.
Another case in point, exactly. And so the problem that you have in the cannabis industry, and it's a big point of contention for everybody, is how wasteful the cannabis industry is. You know, it's not that people want to be wasteful in the cannabis industry, but they are. I mean, you have plastic bottles. I mean, you can use glass, you can use different options, but there's only so many options for what they're serving the cannabis in that people are purchasing, right? And you can't, like, recycle them. You can't take them back to the dispensary and say, hey, can you wash my glass jars and fill them back up again? Which would be great, but you can't. And so there needs to be more sustainable practices in packaging in the cannabis industry as it is. All right, so we're already there where we're like, wow, we got to cut back on our packaging. And now what they're saying is, instead of a 1 gram package that you're buying, and you have 1 gram in a container, you're going to need 10 containers for that. 10. Because it's 1/10 of a gram in a container.
Can I just pause for a second? Because something that drives me crazy is I feel like they're using all of this language, right? Whether people are against the idea of it or people who are pro, right? The average person, I'm going to say user, though I want to find a different word because I hate that.
I'm not a fan of user because it sounds like you're a drug user. You consumer. Right. Just say consumer.
Exactly. Consumer. Right. Has no idea grams, any of that. They're just smoking.
Well, you're talking smoking. See, now that's the thing, is you're also coming from a state that's not quite gotten to this point, right? Right. You know, so just understand that there's going to be a learning curve for everybody there. But you know, just to understand, a gram is a really good amount of concentrates for an average consumer. Okay. And you're looking at a gram starting, if you're on a discount, like you can get to, like, you know, one dispensary I just was at, they have a special once a week where you can get 2 grams for $40. So understand, 1 gram is $20. Okay, on a good price, a decent price on a discount, 1 gram is $20 of concentrates, of like a, you know, decent concentrate, whatever. And it can go up, it can go way up there. You can go up to premiums, and some people can spend as much. It used to be like $60+ a gram, you know, for 1 gram. And so what's funny is they're saying, well, we're worried about the kids. It's always the kids. It's always the guys of the kids. We're worried about the kids. Here's the other thing that has to happen for these kids. So imagine now that you have a child who needs to get a medical recommendation for cannabis because, you know, they have MS, or they have, you know, a debilitating nerve damage, or whatever it can be, you know, whether it's PTSD, whether it's seizures disorders, you know, I'm just naming some of the things that you'll see, you know, reasons for kids to have recommendations for cannabis usage. They're now saying in this rule, they want them to have 2 doctors' recommendations. 2, not just 1. 2 doctors have to have a recommendation, which is ridiculous because...
So that's basically saying if you have your own long-established primary care physician, their opinion is not valid enough?
Well, first of all, understand that your primary care physician is most likely not going to write you a recommendation for medical marijuana in our state, at least. I mean, you could. They are allowed to.
Really?
What you normally have is you have doctors' offices that specialize in recommendations of cannabis. Okay? That's what they do. All right. Sometimes the doctor comes in and works at that office for a short period of time. They maybe like do a couple hours there. Sometimes it's almost retired doctors who come in and say, hey, it's an extra means of making money. I'm going to give you recommendations for cannabis. So that's kind of how it works. So you find a doctor out here. I think one of the best ones is Dr. Cohen. He's very well known. He's very respected. And they actually do a good job. And that's who I get my recommendations from. And we're actually potentially, we'll get into that one down the line. But they're great. And so that's kind of what their specialty is, because it's a process. You have to understand the paperwork. You have to do it right. If you don't do the paperwork right, you have to do it all over again. Now, it generally costs about $100 for that doctor's visit. So now you're gonna put this on this family who, let's be honest, a lot of times when you have medical issues, you already have ridiculous bills. You already have all these problems. You might not have the money for it. And by the way, insurance doesn't cover any of this, right? Okay. So now you're going to make them spend double the amount of money for that. But that's not all. Oh, that's not all. You also need, this is fun, a recommendation or a mental health evaluation. Because again, with no proof, they are worried that children are committing suicide with their cannabis usage.
So who in Colorado, who is the they?
This right now, unfortunately, is actually one of the times that is completely bipartisan, and it was a unanimous vote to move this to the next level on the committee side. Even though there was many people who were not who spoke against this on the medical side, they just don't listen to them. This is something that we've seen in the past, even here in Colorado, and so because you put under the guise of the kids. Well, kids need this help. It's very hard for somebody to say, well, no, I'm not here for safety of kids. Because that's what they're looking at. Like, well, when I run for election, they're going to say, well, he didn't care about the safety of the kids. Even though what's amazing is, okay, so again, let me break down the price. Like, let's just talk about the logic. We don't want kids to be able to buy these concentrates, which, by the way, are more expensive than buying regular flour. Okay? So that's the first thing. More expensive. Concentrates aren't the easiest thing to hide from your parents. All right? If you're dabbing, which is what you're doing with the concentrates most likely, you need a rig. You need a nice big glass rig. You need your nail or what's a heating nail, or you need your blowtorch, your butane torch to get it going. Like, it's not the easiest thing to hide from your parents, okay? Weed is a little bit easier in a way. You can roll a joint, you can just hide, So they're all worried about this whole thing, as if all these kids are super sophisticated enough to go buy all this. And they can be, I'm sure. Kids are sophisticated. But then also this mental health thing, which I think is amazing. It's like, so wait, I need to get a mental health check to use cannabis. Now, if you have schizophrenia, that's actually a thing, just so we're clear. So there are a couple of things that you could have that cannabis is not good for you, and that's one of them. So I can understand that. But now I need a mental health evaluation to buy cannabis, not a gun. I don't need it for a gun.
Thank you.
I don't need mental health evaluation for something that can kill other people. I need something for something I need as medicine. So if that's the case, why aren't you getting mental health evaluations for opioids? If you're really worried about people's health, opioids are more important or a bigger issue. So there's that. But I want to get back to this whole tenth of a gram thing, because this is the mental health thing is just unbelievable lunacy to me. Right. Because now you're talking about 3 doctor's visits. 3, right? It used to be 1. Now it's 3 for these people who may not have money for this. May not have, and insurance doesn't cover it. Yes. So, yeah. Let's go back to the tenth of a gram, though. So you're worried about kids getting concentrates, yet you're going to make them divide one package that used to be 1 into 10. And so now what you're doing is you're actually making it more cost effective for kids to buy concentrates.
Right.
Right? Because I can buy a tenth of a gram now for like $2 to $5. That's easy. Any kid can scrounge up $2 to $5.
Yeah.
You know?
It can be done.
It's easily done. All right. And so this is one of those times when you're really like, you're flapping your gums on this regulation, and it's literally doing nothing for anybody.
Who do you believe, because there's always a beneficiary, so who do you believe is benefiting from doing this?
Well, it's a great question, actually. And I don't know. I don't know who's benefiting from this. You know who's benefiting from this? If this happens, the companies that are going to benefit the most from this are the packaging companies. But they're not.
Okay, yeah,
but they're not.
I would want to find out who they're in bed with.
But they're not. See, the thing is, like, that is putting a level of political sophistication on the cannabis industry that really just doesn't quite exist yet, in my opinion. Okay, for a few reasons.
Really?
First of all, I mean, there are lobbying groups in the cannabis industry, but they're not as big as people think. All right, because there's some that are really big because they have there's a lot of bigger companies behind them, and they're pushing industry towards like the corporate style, and so there's always infighting with that side from the mom and pop shops and those guys. But none of them want this. This is wasteful. It's going to cost every dispensary more money. Like I said, the only companies that are going to benefit from this are the packaging companies. Concentrate companies could be put out of business because of this kind of deal. Literally, I mean, it's going to because it becomes very cost prohibitive to now repackage. Like I said, I mean, if you took, the deal I just said, 2 grams for $40, and you bring down, you had 20 grams for $1, and then you bring in a tenth of a gram. Yeah, you're looking at $2 a gram, but now you're going to pay for the packaging as well. So now the prices are going to be a little bit more, and they're going to charge more again on top of that because you're not going to make enough money off of $2 per. So it will go up to, like I said, probably $5 a tenth of a gram if they do that, and that's just me throwing numbers out and guessing, but. But what you're looking at is it's going to cost these guys more money. It's going to take up more space. It's going to more storage. There's so many issues that are going to come along with this kind of a legislation. And again, it's something that is under the guise of we're helping the children, where I've not heard any cases.
Right. So if Colorado has been so progressive on this issue for so many years,
Yeah.
why do you think they are suddenly becoming regress?
Somebody probably heard one story of something, and again, I'm not hearing enough proof about where this is coming from. All right, and could it be possible that some diversion is happening? Sure, it absolutely could be. There absolutely could be kids buying some and giving it to other kids. That's something that doesn't need to be addressed, right? But
Right.
but this isn't the way to do it. This is again in unenlightened way to approach
Can
this.
you take a stretch and parallel it to alcohol?
The only way I could parallel to alcohol is if we went back to like the 1970s when the drinking age was 18, right? Because what we're looking at is these kids, and again, we're talking about a 3-year time where you're 18 to 21 when you can purchase. Right. If you are under 18, your parents have to go purchase the product for you.
Right.
Okay, and that's medically. Only medically. Recreationally, you can't buy it. It's 21 and up. So you have to have a medical recommendation to get this. All right. It's not going to be hard to keep track of how many kids have medical recommendations. There's only a few thousand of them. They can easily keep track. And there are other things in this bill that are probably okay. There's a tracking thing in this where they can track how much you're purchasing, which kind of already exists, by the way. It actually does. They just need to enforce the existing regulation, do a better job of tracking there. But we have a thing that they call looping. And looping is an issue in the cannabis industry. And what looping is okay, so there is this limit, right? Say you're medical, you have a 40-gram limit you can purchase at a dispensary. So you go to one dispensary, you purchase 40 grams. Then you go to another dispensary and you purchase another 40 grams. And you go to another one, and you could do that all in the same day. That's called looping. Right. Or you could go out, you can go in, you can come back in and later on, or you can go to another one of their stores and purchase again there if they have good deals there. And so there was a company, a pretty large company called Sweet Leaf, that got busted for that. And they got shut down, and they were one of the largest. They were, I would say, in the top 10 in the state, and maybe even in the top 5 actually. And they got shut down. It was a huge bust because they were doing all the looping, and they got in big trouble for this. And so it's not like they're not going after companies that are quote unquote participating in allowing this practice. So looping is something that does need to be addressed. People in the cannabis industry have agreed, yes, we do have to address this. This is us policing ourselves. We have to work on this, and there's tracking that exists that we just need to follow up and do. In the MED, which is called the Marijuana Enforcement Division, that's what they are here. And the MED needs to do a better job of tracking all that stuff. But the fact that they want to do a huge study, and anytime they want to do a study to talk about the negative impacts of cannabis, it kind of cracks me up, because like we've been doing this for a very long time. Right. And with these negative impacts of cannabis, they've still not really found a lot of anything that's worth talking about. But now we're talking about the kids, and now we really have to check out these kids, and what are the effects on mental health with these concentrates in these kids, and these people saying, yeah, I see addiction here just like I see addiction with cocaine and all of that. I'm not saying you can't be mentally addicted to anything, because you can. You can be mentally addicted to cannabis, just like you can be mentally addicted to chocolate or ice cream or anything. But it's not a physical addiction, like in the way that people think of physical addictions, like nicotine or even coffee or sugar. Right. Those, you can literally be physically addicted to those things. You know, I'm not even talking about the hard drugs, right? And so I think that we're just in the world of ridiculousness now, where we're trying to overregulate things because of kids, and I just don't agree with it. I think it's a silly approach. It really is.
I think there's a gazillion issues where we're trying to overregulate things because of kids, but I'm curious. There's something you said. You said you have to be 18. If you're 18 and under.
No, if you're under 18. If you're under 18.
If you're under 18, your parents have to get the medical marijuana?
So yes, your parents, you're their guardian. You're kind of like their, I forget the exact term, medical care provider, caregiver for your kids. So if your kid is under 18, they're not considered an adult. So you have to go in and purchase for them. You can go. I think they can go in with you. I'm not sure if they can go in with you or not, but
so
you have to purchase.
If your child is under 18, you have to be able to. You as the adult have to go in to purchase medical grade.
Well, yeah, medical. The reason why you do medical is, first of all, you can buy more product at a time, and you get a better deal. Like you don't pay as much in taxes, and so.
And if you're over 18,
if you're 18, go on.
You can get it yourself.
If you have a medical recommendation. So everyone would say prescription, but it's not actually a prescription. It's a medical recommendation, which sounds like a prescription, for cannabis, because cannabis is not federally legally a medicine, even though there's actual federal patents owned by the government for cannabis as a medicine.
So if you have no medical issue and you wanted to get some, you would have to wait till you're 21.
Correct. Think of it as alcohol then. Then it's 21. Okay. And so that's how it rolls here. So we're really talking about regulating kids in a 3-year window, 18 to 21. That's what we're regulating them on. So they're an adult.
It still blows my mind that we are still living in a world where we're telling people, if you're under 21, you can't have a drink. You can't purchase marijuana. But you can be given a gun to join the military and go murder someone.
You can die for our country. You can vote. You cannot purchase cannabis or purchase alcohol. Well, and during the draft time in the Vietnam War, they did change the drinking age to 18 because
Because after you murder someone for your country, you might
drink.
be a little traumatized and need a drink.
Exactly. Although what would be better for them would have been cannabis.
Thank you.
Yeah, because it helps for PTSD, and it would have been probably very helpful for a lot of those kids. Yeah. So anyway, it's just really weird, and it's really depressing when you see like a lot of people think of Colorado as progressive, but a lot of people don't realize when Colorado legalized cannabis, we were actually very regulatory on it. We had to be, because we were the first state really to like really go all in on this and as a free market, which was great. So we had the free market, which was a great way to open up the cannabis industry, and I still think we did that very well in a lot of aspects. Of course, obviously there's things to nitpick in there and how we did it, but it's really weird that this is like a backward step to me. The way this is being approached, they could have approached everything individually, but they're trying to make one big bill, which I hate when they do this one size fits all bill, right? You should have said, okay, we want to handle looping. Here's what we want to do, address looping. Let's do a bill for looping. Okay. We want to do this. Let's do each thing by like what it is and say, okay, here's what we're trying to do. Now let's discuss this. Do we want to, do 1/10 of a gram per package? Because they really need to recognize this is a stupid idea. That is really one of the dumbest things is the 10th gram per package, on so many levels. And if they finally just recognize that environmentally it's a terrible choice, I hope that that alone will be enough to make them go, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this whole 1/10 of a gram thing. Because it's just dumb. I mean, you're saying you can buy 8 grams, but if you want to buy 8 grams, 80 packages. Yeah. 80 packages, 80 little freaking packages for this. And it's not like it's like hash you can just like squeeze out of a tiny little tube. It's not like I can put it in like a ketchup packet and you can have it. You got to be able to get access to it. And 1/10 of a gram is small. So like I don't want to waste any bit of that in my like trying to get it out. So like you can't, it still has to be in a glass container to really have the best access to utilizing this product.
But see, I still think that it's somehow connected to police and policing and how much a person has on them. There's a reason.
You think so? I don't know. I get what you're saying, Rob, but we're not in that's we've always had the attitude in Colorado since legalization that we are lightening the police job, the job of our police force. That said, I did find something disturbing that we're top 5 in the country for police shootings.
For what?
Colorado is top 5 in the country for police shootings per capita. Yeah. Well, that happened. Alaska's number 1 because it also goes by, you're sparsely populated. So like the percentage of shootings that happen, and so that is why like generally we're in that realm because of, the mountains and everything that we don't have as many people living in Colorado. So every time a police shooting happens, it's a larger percentage. So there is a little bit of that in there, but we've had actually a lot of police shootings. Wow. Yeah, it's so I just saw that in the news today. It was kind of disturbing, but and we don't hear enough about it.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that's my little gripe with 1317. We're going to talk more about this, and hopefully we're going to be having some, I'm going to talk to some other experts on it and do some shows with them on this, because it's I don't know. It's just, it's one of those times. This regulation is just stupid. It's just stupid.
Wow.
But
wow.
Thinking of stupid as a transition, man. Let's. What do you want to talk about first in the world? And I need one of these while you're doing that.
Yeah. Well, 2 of the larger issues, right? One is around the Israel-Palestine conflict. And the other is around all of the ongoing apologists for the 4 years of the Trump administration, for the insurrection, all of these things that are truly detrimental to our alleged democracy, but that people just want to brush off.
So
right.
Why do you use the word apologists? Is that what I mean? Like, is that the right word? I'm just curious because Verbally,
Because,
you're
well,
more
yeah, because I think
loquacious.
these are a lot of people who made excuses,
Hmm.
right? There was so much, especially around when Trump would speak. There were so many people who would say, "Well, that's just the way he talks. Like, what's the big deal?" Um,
Hmm.
whereas we know any other person prior to that moment in the course of history would have been trashed for speaking the way that he did.
Yeah.
And they make excuses for his behavior,
Hmm.
his words that then in turn led to what in our lifetime we haven't. There was nothing like the January 6th riots, right? They love to use the word riots about
They don't want.
Black
Yeah, they
Lives
won't use.
Matter,
Yeah, they use the riots about Black Lives
rally.
Matter.
Those are all riots.
But
But
this wasn't
with
a riot. This
this,
this was an insurrection.
and someone, I don't know who it was, someone described it as tourists, right? They were touring the Capitol.
Hmm.
Those are the apologists, people who see evil directly in their faces and just find a way to excuse
Just
it away.
excuse it away. I know. Well, and it is amazing how quickly stories change, and the
Yeah.
things that people get upset about, right? The people that like what was it? What was the one that what happened last week? Kevin McCarthy he was criticizing Biden for getting 5 hours of sleep. He sleeps 5 hours. That's so much. Like what? Yeah, he's really is sleep. It's like, are you 5 hours? I don't know. I'm not happy on 5 hours of sleep, and I do 5 hours quite often actually. And I notice the difference when I don't sleep.
I try to do somewhere between 6 and 7 on average. Like
Yes,
it's
I
not
need 6 or
8 hours of
7.
sleep that have to work my schedule.
Yeah.
Um, but it's an unnecessary conversation of all of the shit that's going on in the world. The most important thing to talk about is that Biden gets 5 hours of sleep.
Well, it just shows you how weak their arguments are, right? Because I mean, I think there are some strong criticisms you could do of Biden, but those criticisms are more from the
Oh
Progressive
yeah,
Party.
yeah.
The
I'm not a fan
yeah,
of the man,
but
but
but the
that's not my issue.
but the criticisms are more from the progressives. The Republicans can't criticize. I mean, and this is where Biden does kind of win out in the like who's being the better politician right now by kind of stepping like he's kind of like the art of doing nothing kind of thing.
Mm,
But I mean, like he's just like, I'm just gonna work, y'all. Like, I mean, you might not agree with the work he's doing, but generally, what I'm seeing is like the dude's working, or he's behind the scenes directing other people who are working because people are working. And that's all that's what I'm seeing. We can now have the real conversations of what about their work do I like? What about their work do I not
right,
like? But you can't
right.
say they're not working. You is easy to
Yeah,
recognize, right? Like,
they are working, and they're working on things that it's like and again, if people want to be Republicans, they have a right to be a Republican. I don't think that people should not be. Like I said, I feel like there should be. Do I think that we should have a parliamentary system? Not necessarily, not at this moment, but I do think we should have a much more diversity than the two-party system. We've talked about that before. Um, but at this moment in time, I don't know what the Republican Party is claiming to work on. What exactly are they doing on behalf of the people of this country, besides making apologies
no.
for
Yeah.
insurrectionists and blocking whatever Biden wants to put forward?
Yeah. What I see from the Republican Party is they are only working on behalf of the Republican Party. All right. Like the voter suppression laws, whether they're
Yeah,
going to be effective or not. Because I think there's an argument to say that they're not even going to be effective because they've pissed off enough people on the other side that they will do whatever they can to vote and get these guys out. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with some of these laws, and they're going to be challenged, and they'll be hopefully they could be frozen in court before they can be enacted, which is a strategy that'll potentially work over the next year or two, right? But
mm-hmm.
but they are obviously serving themselves. When it came to the judges, I mean, that's what like the first. I mean, like that's one thing you'll say. Mitch McConnell was like he was rolling through judges like crazy, which I'd be like really interested to see is that happening on the Biden side because there's still appointments that need to be filled. Right,
Yeah.
And so I'd like to be seeing that from the Senate side right now because that's something they only need a 50% majority for. They don't. It's.
But I also want to say, like, if they with the judges, right? And I know there's a lot of they're taking up abortion cases, so
Mhm.
forth and so on. I really want. I don't. I was going to say I really want to understand. I don't because I really don't care about anybody who identifies as Republican. But
Mhm.
what is it? So you don't you want to roll back abortion rights, right?
Yeah.
The right
Yeah.
to choice, um, but you don't want to pay people or work to create a country that actually pays people more.
Yeah.
So you want them to have a child that
But
maybe they
we have
can't
less money.
afford, and then not be able to find a job to pay for that child.
Well, the progressive conspiracy theorist in me, all right,
Yeah,
will say that that is absolutely a great strategy, isn't it? Because if you can keep people poor and keep people, and when you're poor, you tend to have a harder time and harder access to good education. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So, not at all saying poor people are uneducated. I'm saying that you have a
No, it's
harder
access.
you have harder access to education, and so keep them poor by having kids, when they shouldn't, and and putting them in a situation where they're consistently in debt because there's still slavery in this country. We're comfortable
Oh, yeah,
slavery. You
yeah.
could say we're much more comfortable, we're the most comfortable slaves in history, if you want to say it that way. Like, and that's,
Mm.
you know what I mean. And that's the thing is, like, if you have comfort, you'll put up with more. And so I think what we're looking at right now, you just look at it like, okay, so debt. And by the way, what I mean by slavery is debt. To me, debt is slavery. Uh, um,
It's a way. I mean, it's a way
it's
of
a means.
keeping people in chains.
Yes, it is. And now some debt is your own damn fault. Absolutely, I get it. By whatever choices, but it's very easy to put people in debt the way society is
Especially
set
if
up.
you grow up in a country that does not promote financial literacy in schools. So
Well, yeah. Well, we're not financially literate. Look at our government. I mean, look at the way we operate. And so
no, but can I just challenge that for one
go
second?
for
I
it.
don't know that they're not financially literate. They
Mm.
are financially literate. They're intentionally misusing and misappropriating
Ah,
funds.
I like that. That's actually a good way to say that. Actually, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So it's a way. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. My conspiracy theorist, my progressive conspiracy theorist says yes. They want them to be in debt. They want them to be tied down by kids that they can't afford. They want people to be in this position where they can sway their education much easier. And they've recognized that there is a large portion of the country. Let's just say a good amount of Trump base MAGA people who tend to not be willing to be critical thinkers, and they are. It's easier to work with them to get them to vote against their best interests. Is really
Because large swaths of those people are poor and
yes,
uneducated.
yes, correct. Well, just like so yeah, they're taking advantage of that. They absolutely are. And it comes down to not being a critical thinker. Yeah.
right, right. So they don't want people to have choice. I don't, not that they don't want people specifically. They don't want women to have bodily choice, number one. So then they want you to have a child,
Yeah.
but they don't want to create a system where you can make more money. They don't want to pay you more for unemployment. They don't want to put money into schools. They do want to allow charter schools to come in that cost money that you now don't have.
Correct. Correct. And they don't want to have any kind of social safety net for you when you can't afford to take care of your kids.
Because God forbid, it's interesting because even like, Social Security, which has its issues. And one day I do want us to like do a deep dive into Social Security, especially around the fact that Social Security, which is sold to us as something that belongs to you.
Right.
Yet when you die, your family has no access to whatever.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to like, what do you do with that? I mean, that's an interesting conversation. We'll have to get into that one because that's a really loaded one. Because I get what you're saying. Like my parents are a good example, right? My parents are my dad's 80, my mom's in her 70s, in her mid 70s, and they're relatively healthy. I mean, they're for their age, right? But we are in their the twilight of their years, right? And I already know that we've talked about this. If like, so if one of my parents die, the other one gets whichever Social Security was the best, right?
Right.
They get that. And I'm like, but wait a minute. You lived in a household where you needed both of those Social Security checks.
Thank you.
So now,
Thank you.
like, my mother can't survive in the house that she's in right now, in the property. So now, not only does she lose her spouse, she loses her house.
Her house that she worked her whole life for.
Right, at the same time, right? And that's
it's a disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, and I had a slight awareness of it, but not a deep awareness until my father passed. That the larger of the two Social Security checks is what my mother was able to receive. Luckily, thank God for blessings that she's okay and she can function with that.
Right.
One, but the reality is, Social Security is sold to us as a thing that is yours. It's yours. Yet, when a person dies, their household, which is dependent upon that check, no longer has access to both of those checks.
Yeah.
But we'll do a deeper dive.
We'll have to do that. Yeah.
But the notion that it was set up at a time where there was an understanding that there should be some degree of, it wasn't called socialism, but a degree of protection for people. And now we have, again, largely the Republican Party, who's against any concept of protections, except for an unborn fetus.
Oh, and corporations. They're really good about protecting corporations and banks. Sorry. Yes. Those are the people, quote unquote, that they'll protect, are the corporations, those kind of people. So, yeah.
It's
the people that literally, that can't. So I guess if you can't breathe on your own, you're a person to them.
There you go.
Got it.
But if you can, you should go out and pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
There you go. But here's something I want to. So we did say we were going to talk about Israel, and let's talk about it. As somebody who's just mildly educated on Israel, I'm absolutely not like, I'm not invested personally. Like, I don't have family there, so I be clear on all that. I do like. I think this is one of those times when now we're seeing, like, again, the Democrats are starting to say, maybe not this whole, like, we're going to support everything Israel does. Like, the progressive side of the party is very much like, let's revisit this whole thing. Like, this whole statement, like, because there's the common statement comes out, right, Rob, that Israel has the right to defend itself.
Israel has the right to defend, and Palestinians have the right to defend themselves.
Yep,
right?
Palestinians have the right.
And we were talking about this, before we went on the air. Is the reality is that in a parallel universe, the United States is Israel, and Palestinians are the indigenous people of the United States. Right? That is the parallel of what's happening right there. I don't want bloodshed. I would say for the most part, I'm a pacifist. I don't want murdered children, people, period. Simultaneously, I can't go along with this notion that this one country that Israel deserves greater respect somehow than Palestinians do.
Yeah.
If the indigenous people of the United States, right, who, again, and I feel like it's culturally it's happening, they should be referred to as indigenous people. They should not be referred to, though there may be some people who will choose the title, they should not be referred to as Indians. They be referred to as Indians because Columbus got lost, and so they started to call them Indians. They should not be referred to as American Indians.
Just so you know, I agree, but I do know some Native Americans who said, we don't care if you call us Indians. And so,
exactly. There are some people who don't, who don't mind it. But when I think of the people who I have relationships with who are indigenous, who prefer a different title, and they don't like American Indian, like I said, because America is the thing that came later.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. They don't want to be defined by that as well, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But if those individuals ever rose up and started to fight back against the U.S. government, they would have every right, because the U.S. government infringed on their land.
Consistently.
Consistently. They're still doing it now.
Still doing it. No, it's not like, and I'm sorry, it's not funny. I mean, but it's just like, it's the absurdity of it that is still happening, you know? And so, yeah, I should have my neighbor on. He's an attorney for tribal,
Oh, really? I mean, yeah, you're sort of living in a tribal nation area.
We all are, actually.
I mean, we all are, 100%.
Right. But yeah, no, but like I do. I mean, because that's a great conversation to have too. But let's to just kind of go back to topic. I do agree with your parallel. That we are looking at like in a sense, right? In a sense, we're looking at it that way. The only difference that you can give to Israel is they were kicked out of their country thousands of years ago, and that's the argument, right? And this is the chance for Israel, for Jews to be able to come home to where they were, you know, ostracized from, which was, you know, and except for that, it just doesn't hold water anymore because like that would be the same argument. Like if we decided, like you're saying, if you want to use that parallel, that would be like, well, then the Native Americans should be able to just come in and like, you know, the Ipswich tribe, I think, was in New York, right? I think it was. Like they should be able to come and take New York and say, you know what, Manhattan's ours, people. We got it. You know, except for it was purchased, so we can. That's how we get away with it, right? Although a lot of times we're like, well, we traded for that land with them. You know, with those smallpox. I know.
The purchase is a lie that was created. Like it doesn't matter.
I get that.
Whatever that they offered, it was still stolen.
Exactly.
Right. It's so.
But that's
this notion. We have a world full of colonization, right? That no one wants to, like, even the notion, there's a large amount of pushback on the notion of critical race theory as a thing that's taking place in the United States specifically, right? Because, you know, we don't want to talk about that, or that's offensive, or to make America look bad. No, it's to actually dig in and tell hard, uncomfortable truths about race as a tool.
Right.
Which no one wants to do, right? And we're seeing it play out here. We're seeing it play out. It's race, it's culture and ethnicity in Israel and Palestine, right? And, you know, the Aboriginal people in Australia. Like, we are a world of success by colonization.
Yes.
And until we are willing to even talk about it. And the thing that pisses me off the most is that so many people don't want to talk about it because they feel like, which says more about them as people, that they feel like they're going to be attacked. So when I hear, like, if I hear a white person in the United States say, I don't want to talk about, you know, I wasn't here. Okay, nobody's saying you were there, right? Right? It's 2021. We're not saying that you were there in 1700, 1800, 1600, but you are living in a world where you benefit from what happened.
Correct. Yeah, I mean,
people don't want to do that.
Yeah, I know, because my family, both sides of my parents, they came to the U.S. in the 1920s, 30s, around that time period, right? They were immigrants from Italy and Greece, and that's when they came over here. All right. So I can make that argument, like, yeah, no slavery in my background, right?
But beneficiaries of a system that allows people with whiter skin to thrive.
That's exactly what I was about to say. But I still have been a beneficiary of white privilege by being here, because it's not, you know, I mean, yes, Italians were discriminated back in the day. Yes, I get it. Every immigrant's been discriminated in this country. It's kind of like you're hazing. It's how we haze our immigrants.
It's true.
You're going to have to spend the next 20, 30 years at least of us giving you a lot of shit, people. All right. And then maybe you'll be okay. Maybe.
But if people could also comprehend, I remember having, I don't know if I said this in a previous episode, but I remember having a conversation probably about 10 years ago with a coworker of mine, white guy of Italian descent, right? He was born in the United States. His parents were born in the United States. I think his grandparents came to the United States. And in the course of like debating, like we were like having drinks at a bar at a conference in Florida, and he said, we kept repeatedly saying, you know, well, when my grandparents came here, they had to struggle, so forth and so on. And I said, but you keep missing the part where you said they came here.
Choice.
They made a choice
Yes.
to come here to a country that was welcoming. I'll pause on full welcoming, but to a country that did allow them to enter,
Correct.
right? That's completely different than people my ancestors who were dragged here,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then systemically discriminated against, right? Which is even, I don't want to say better or worse, but you have, people who are indigenous, whose ancestors were here and were slaughtered.
Yes.
Right? Those are the things that people would be willing to just, because at the end of that conversation, I will give him credit, this former coworker who said to me, he was like, I never really processed it in language like that.
Sure.
And I've been a language person since I was a kid. It's
yes, you have. Yes, you have.
Thing. And I do believe that if you can revisit and restructure language so that it actually speaks to truth, you can change a gazillion.
I agree with that. Language is incredibly powerful, and I think that is something that people don't pay enough attention to, is the words we choose to use, and that is important. That is a really good point. Like, you have to think, and that's one of the things that I have to stop and think about, fairly regularly, is what you just said. Is like, well, they came here, they chose to come here, they were not taken here, they were not stolen and brought here. And what happens to a people that, and that have been like what Black Americans have been dealing with, right? Is this history of not, it wasn't the choice. There was no choice as a people, and so it's and it's just been taken away, and it's just
whole
how do you process it?
Things could change. Like, even before, we were just talking about the justices on the court and they're taking up abortion issues. Whenever I hear someone on TV talk about people who are anti-abortion or pro-abortion, right? And I feel like, at least within my circle of people that I know and relate to, right? And I know a number of women in my world who have had abortions, right? It's not an easy decision by any stretch of the imagination.
No, not at all.
No one, right, is pro-abortion.
No one.
They are pro-choice.
Yes, that is a big difference. It is a big difference. And it is
when
important.
You watch people when they throw out pro-abortion, they are attempting to destroy the language in the conversation.
Of course they are. Of course. And I think that's, and that's one of the things I will say, I think the right side is very good at that. I think they're much better at abusing the skill of words to get their point across. And they really are very good at dictating the conversation. That's always been my biggest complaint about progressives, is they don't control the conversation. They are very reactive. And maybe it's because, the Republicans are always throwing crazy trick plays at them that they're like, well, they're just not playing the same game. That's the thing.
But they have been playing the same game for decades. Like, I don't know why people are not catching on.
Yeah. No, I do think people are catching on. I think that the problem is that we still have people, and God, I hate that he keeps getting mentioned, but you have people like Joe Manchin who are holding back the country and holding back the party by thinking, for some bizarre reason, that they're going to be able to negotiate with the Republicans. But what they do is they'll put a bill together. Republicans are really good. They get to the table because, like, well, you say you're bipartisan, so let's come to the table. They water down the bill, and then they vote against it anyway.
Right.
So the Democrats are like, well, we'll give you something. Here you go. And they're like, yeah, fuck you. We still going to say no.
Right.
And so the Democrats need to stop watering down bills and just making them and pushing them through. I mean, obviously, you got to get rid of the filibuster. And I actually hope that we find, I hope that there's a backlash on Republicans even further. Like, they always say the midterm always goes in the favor of the non-presidential candidate. I really think that this time we might buck that trend. Because I think enough people are fed up and enough of American people don't want to forget what happened in the last few years.
Right.
You know, I mean, nobody wants to go back to the tweet storms. I mean, really. I mean, you know,
but enough people do because 70 whatever million people voted for
yeah, but I think that yes, but I think that there are out of that 70 million, there's at least a few million that would have taken that vote back now. Because of the insurrection and because of the things that happened in suit. There's a few. I'm not saying that he still wouldn't get like 65 million, 68, you know, it's still a ridiculous amount, but I think that there is some that'll go, oh yeah, because the popularity of Trump in retrospect has dropped even more. All right. And so when you start seeing those things happening, I think that you can look back and go, okay, there's a group that won't do that again. Now, what do the Democrats do to keep them on that side? And that's what I'm saying. I think that you'll see with somebody like Joe Manchin, I don't that people go, well, shit, you know, this might work out. And I'm trying to silver lining this, right? But they might go, well, crap, we don't have enough of a majority. We really need to change shit, because a lot of people will finally recognize, wow, Republicans will say no every time. They're just going to say no. They're going to say no. So you can't negotiate this. So if we want to move forward, if we want to get anything going, we have to do this. The thing that's going to be, I think, a key is how fast does the economy get back going in the way it is.
Well, that's going to be a determining factor over the course, which is a thing that won't present itself, you know, in the short term.
It takes time.
At least
it takes time.
Year.
Yeah, at least a year. At least a year.
You know,
it takes time.
What will this time? We are a year out from shutting the world down.
Yeah.
So now that things are, you know, reopening, you know, in various ways here and there, what does a year from now?
What does a year from now think? Look, I mean, I'm already seeing it here. You know, I went and, we're going to have to talk about this another time. I banking, because I had to go get a new bank account. And, we'll get into that because I'm related to the cannabis industry. That's a fun job to do. I've never been banned for life from a bank before, but that's happened. So.
Really?
For just being adjacent to the cannabis industry years ago. Yeah, we'll get into it. I went to Chase Bank just to open another bank. I wanted something that was a little more digitally savvy than my bank, which is happy to work with them companies. But and so I just wanted like an account, a simple account. And I go in and it's like, just so you know, you guys closed an account for me for business and personal like years ago in the cannabis industry, even though you had me for 6 years and blah, blah, blah. And then you close my account. I just want to come back in a checking account. Can we just do that really quickly? And the only reason why I was doing it because they're super close to my house and it was convenient. And I'm fine not working with them ever again. And you know, Jackie's gonna probably pull her account from them now, because fuck Chase. But they said, oh yeah, you're banned for life because you should. And the guy even was like, well, what if cannabis becomes legal federally? Well, is he still? And they're like, yep, we've decided that, you know. And
they use the word ban.
They use, well, no, I'm saying the word banned. So they use the word that I will never be allowed to have a cut account there again. So banned.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you are in the, you know, cannabis progressive state.
Yeah. Well, no. This is not a state thing. This is a federal thing. This is Chase Bank. They're a federal bank. So understand that has nothing to do with it. There are state banks here that do work with the cannabis industry. So it's and so, you know, that's what I'm doing. Anyway, but that was a side thing. So we didn't even get into solving Israel's problems, and
no, we didn't.
We kept tangent, which we do.
No, we probably needed Jared Kushner here because he has all the answers apparently. So
well, and that's why the fighting started. Is that we don't have Jared anymore.
Right.
So
what do we do without Jared Kushner to solve all of our problems?
Yeah, but that said, I do believe I want to make this statement. Like both sides, and I'm talking about the people, not the government, of the conversation have been pretty overwhelmingly in favor of the two state solution. And it drives me crazy when you see the government, and again, government's not aligned with the people on either side. And and it comes down. We'll have to. I do want to talk more about it, and I'm sure there's going to be some developments on it, and we'll touch base on it. I would like to see us move a little towards the center of the conversation between Palestine and Israel, and not be so much like Israel's big brother with a huge stick right behind them.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing that I'd like to see. I mean, I think we all want peace in the Middle East, and can we just not bring? I wish we could not bring religion into the conversation and just
But you can't, because religion is the centerpiece of that conversation.
And that's the problem, right? And that's why this has been going on for so long, because religion takes rationality out of it.
We'll talk about it in the
We'll talk about it in the next one. We're actually at an hour, which is it flew by.
That's amazing.
It flew by. I hadn't been watching, but thanks everybody for listening to us. Whether you were listening to us on YouTube or on Facebook, of course, we were prepared for it and went to YouTube.
The Facebook stream ran fine.
And Facebook ran fine. So maybe Facebook fixed their issue. We tend to get more comments on Facebook, so maybe we'll say that, but we'll keep them both rolling. And we appreciate everybody hanging with us today. It was one of those days that really just rolled along, man.
Yeah.
Quick show. The hour flew. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy the wonderful weather we're having. Well, at least we're having. Are you having? It's just.
Yeah.
Yes, please. And we'll be back with more fun conversation. We'll solve our cultural world's problems in an hour. Because
we will.
One bowl, 1 hour. We're ready to roll. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Until